amazed by the Quran?
So in the Arabic language, there are two ways of saying wasn't. Okay, so you can say lam yakun, wasn't, or ma kana also means wasn't. But in this world, there are nations that may rebel against God, but they might find their way back. Allah's decision about them hasn't been set in stone. They still have a chance to earn forgiveness. He didn't condemn anybody and make any nation God-forsaken, as the term is used.
Supercharge your learning during this series by downloading our free guided workbook from bayina.com/amazed.
Ustad, I saw your lecture on Bayina TV on verbs and nouns in Arabic, and I just had a couple questions to clarify, if you don't mind.
I don't mind.
Yeah. You said nouns and verbs significantly change the understanding of an ayah.
Yeah.
But why when I'm, reading an English translation, I don't really fully understand it? Can you clarify a little bit?
Yeah, there are lots of ayat where nouns and verbs sort of interchange, and there are places where a verb was used and a very similar place, a noun was used in its place. And it will immediately ring an alarm bell for the Arab, especially one who knows classical Arabic, but it won't really show in the English translation. Actually, by definition, a noun like apple, tree, happiness, etc., nouns don't have a tense. They're not past or present or future. They're timeless in that sense. So rhetorically speaking, a noun is considered timeless. Verbs, on the other hand, have tense, past tense or present tense or future tense. Even the imperative is in the present tense in a sense. So tenses or verbs are temporary because they are caged in time. Okay. So nouns are timeless and verbs are caged in time. Now what happens in the Arabic language, interestingly, is sometimes when you're talking about an act, you can actually use a noun or a verb. And when you translate that into the English language, when you translate it in the Quran, for example, an average translation, we don't have that luxury in English. So we always translate it as a verb. Right, so you don't get to see that sometimes what we're thinking is a verb was actually used as a noun in the Quran, right? Because they're just exactly the same way that would be translated. So, for instance, not in the Quran, but in regular Arabic, ajlisu, I'm sitting. Ana jalis, I'm sitting. While ajlisu is a verb and jalis is a noun. So you'd translate the same way, I'm sitting. Okay? Now, let's appreciate the rhetorical difference as is used in the Quran. It's very subtle. So I'll give you 3 examples of that in, order of complexity. The first example is about hypocrites talked about in Surah Al-Baqarah. And Allah says that when they come to believers, they say that they believe. وَإِذَا لَقُوا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا قَالُوا آمَنَّا. When they are in the company of believers, they would say that they have believed. وَإِذَا خَلَوْا إِلَى شَيَاطِينِهِمْ قَالُوا إِنَّا مَعَكُمْ إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ مُسْتَهْزِئُونَ. When they're in the company of their devils, their shayateen, they say, we're with you, we're just joking. So now you've got we believe and we're joking, which in the English language are both verbs. Interestingly enough, in the Arabic though, we believe is set as amanna, which is a verb. Now remember, verbs are temporary. And joking is mustahzi'un, which is a noun. Like you wouldn't see that in translation. They'll just say joking and you'll think it's a verb, but it's a noun. Now what does that imply? The rhetorical implication thus is that these hypocrites, their long-term permanent allegiances lie with those who they speak in the long-term sense, meaning they're devils. Yes, they try to have loyalties on both sides, but they're long loyalties, and their constancy is with the shayateen, with the devils, subhanAllah. And that's how Allah exposes where they lean more. Now the second case. This is about declaring Allah's perfection. Doing tasbih, as most Muslims know it as doing tasbih. We can't always do tasbih. Tasbih is not something that I can do constantly. We do it after salah, we do it when we're remembering Allah, etc. Which is why it's understandable that in the Quran, when tasbih, declaring Allah's perfection, is talked about, it is talked about as a verb. Allah did not expect us to be musabbihin, people who do the declaration of Allah's perfection constantly. It's impossible for us, right? Which is why even Allah says the entire heavens and the earth declare Allah's perfection, and He uses a verb. Because we're included in it, shaitan, or the jinns are included in it, even if not shaitan, the jinn are included, and we don't do declaring of Allah's perfection constantly. Okay? Now, there are 2 exceptions to that. The first exception is the Prophet Yunus, and the second exception is the angels talked about in the Quran, both in the 37th surah, Safat.
Allah talks about when Yunus alayhi salam was in the belly of the whale, the biblical name Jonah, right? When he was in the belly of the whale. And Allah says, فَلَوْلَا أَنَّهُ كَانَ مِنَ الْمُسَبِّحِينَ Had it not been the case that he was from those who constantly declared perfection. You know, he would have remained in the belly of the whale. Now, how do I know he constantly declared perfection? Because unlike everywhere else in the Quran, here Allah decided to use a noun. The permanence is articulated. It's awesome. To suggest he has nothing else to think about when he's in the belly of the whale. As long as he's there, he's just, how perfect you are, how perfect you are, how perfect you are.